Our speaker today is James Warnken, and he's with Clear Vision Marketing and Media. He's the owner and the founder and executive director of Stark Ally. James is a legally blind slash visually impaired digital accessibility expert and consultant, passionate about helping organizations achieve their digital accessibility goals. James's background in digital marketing, technology, and business, combined with his 19+ years of lived experience with a disability to help make achieving accessibility goals both actionable and affordable. When organizations are accessible, this ensures everyone, employees and customers, has the same opportunities and experiences, no matter their abilities. To date, James has trained hundreds of professionals on digital accessibility importance and best practices and led the way on more than 50 accessibility projects. And we are actually proud to have James be our accessibility consultant in our upcoming revamp of the OACB website. So welcome.
Awesome. I think I turned it on. We good? Awesome. Well, thank you, Laura, for the introduction. And yes, we are beyond excited to be working with you and the team on the website revamp. During our kickoff call last week, RJ texted me while we were on the call and said, wow, they brought us in super early on, which is super exciting. The earlier you can start, the better the end result is going to be. So excited to be starting from step one with you guys. So with that said, I think we're all here because we are aware of Title II, but maybe not feeling super great about it at this point. Hopefully nobody's angry about it. But if you're on the other side, you're the blue guy over here, you probably are in the wrong room. Most of us are probably somewhere in the middle. Hopefully by the end, we can bring some clarity around what this final rule is, what it means, and how do we actually get there. So hopefully by the end, we're the blue smiley face on the far right there. So Laura, you covered a lot of my background, but just to give some additional context, I originally started my career in the world of digital marketing, doing pretty much anything you can think of in that world, mostly designing and building websites. But before that, when I was 9 years old, I was diagnosed with what is called Stargardt's. So I have been losing my vision over the last almost 19 years. Progressively, I describe it as being both near and farsighted at the same time, where there's like a central zone where I can see good enough to not be running into things. On top of that, I've spent the last 4 years in the digital accessibility world. We were just having a conversation before this that growing up, going through school, I was told that once I got out of school, it was up to me to make things accessible for me. It wasn't until 2020, 2021 that I even learned that as a person with a disability, organizations had a responsibility in this conversation. And so I decided to try to get involved and do something about it. Over the last couple of years, we've trained hundreds of professionals, designers, developers, UX, leadership on accessibility best practices. And RJ and I have helped deliver more than 50 accessibility projects with Fortune 500s, with state governments at the federal level and even at the international level. So RJ is sitting up here with me. He is the partner in crime when it comes to the accessibility work that we do under Clear Vision, which if you could see the badges there across the bottom, we both hold the IAAP CPACC certification. I believe there's just over 6,000 globally that hold that. And then with Clear Vision and me being an individual with a disability, we did go ahead and get the the EDGE certification as a disabled-owned small business. So a little bit of background there on why I'm up here and who I am. And so before we talk about where we're at now and where these deadlines are coming in the next couple of years, I think it's a good opportunity to take a step back and how we got here. We can go all the way back to 1973, where we had the introduction of the Rehabilitation Acts, the first major piece of legislation dedicated towards ending discrimination against people with disabilities and looking at accessibility. 1990, we saw the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is where that Title II update comes from. Hopefully, we're all at least relatively familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act, but over that 35-year span, we've had the introduction of the Section 508 standards at the federal level. We've had WCAG 2.0, we've had CVAA, WCAG 2.1, 2.2, and the ICT refresh rule, and what we're all here to talk about, the Title II final rule from last year. So the interesting thing about this timeline is you'll notice it starts pretty spread out, but over the last couple of years, we've been ramping up, getting faster turnarounds on some of these updates and modifications. But the thing to note here is the Section 508 standards are still referencing version 2.0. The Title II update is only referencing 2.1. So 2.2 is in there. It's just we haven't updated to that yet. So I think it's good to look at the timeline and figure out how we got to where we are rather than just trying to figure it out all out at once. And so why is this important? Besides being a part of the community, being a part of that estimated 26%, it's massively important to me because it means that I have opportunities to access and engage. But as we look at the general statistics, a quarter of the population lives with a disability. As the age increases, that goes up to nearly 40%. So you're looking at anywhere from a quarter to roughly half of the population that we're talking about within the disability community. And if you're not going to do it for the other people, it's pretty safe to assume at this point that most of us are going to experience a disability at some point throughout our lives. And so if you're not going to do it for the community, prepare for your future. The day more than likely will come where you need those accommodations, you need those features. And if they're not there, it's going to be pretty difficult. So besides that, we are here to serve and support our communities. It's more than just a legal requirement. It's more than just the right thing to do. Everybody deserves to have the same opportunities to access and engage. And when they do, they share a similar experience. All right, enough background. So Title II rolled out, caused a lot of questions. We've done multiple Title II webinars talking about what it is, what it means, how to meet the requirements by the specified deadlines. From a high level, Title II requires state and local governments to conform to the WCAG 2.1 AA standards. And that is including websites, that includes mobile applications, that includes covered content. We'll get to that in a second. And pretty much anything under that digital sphere needs to be accessible by those deadlines. This came down from the DOJ, and ultimately what this says at a high level, web content accessibility guidelines are a set of principles, guidelines, and criteria that help guide us through creating and maintaining accessible experiences. So has 4 principles, it has 13 guidelines and 80-something success criteria that help us to ensure that when we're creating documents or websites or applications, we're considering users with visual disabilities, like myself with low vision, or users who are totally blind. We're considering people who are colorblind. We're considering the deaf and hard of hearing, the limited mobility, the cognitive disabilities, not just from a broad perspective, but within specific experiences and technologies as well, whether it be desktop or mobile, it be a mobile app or a web app. We're sort of encompassing more than just web content, as the name implies at this point, but that's pretty much it. From a simple breakdown, that's what it all comes down to. And ultimately, it applies to state governments, it applies to local governments, but it extends to special groups, it extends to universities and public schools, it extends to pretty much anybody acting on behalf of the state or local government. So there's more than just your offices or your departments or your agencies that are required to meet these deadlines, which I think most of us stop at the state and local government and don't really dive much deeper than what that says. And so the deadline. So for entities serving populations above 50,000, your deadline is 6 months from now, April. I think there's 16 counties in Ohio that serve that population above 50,000. So that's a pretty short timeline. If you're serving a population below that, you have a year and 6 months or so to get to that point of compliance within the final rule. So it really depends on the size of the population, how much time you have. And so what happens if you don't meet the deadline? That's usually one of the big questions that comes up. When you don't meet the deadline, there's a whole bunch of things that can happen. Whether you're a state or local government, the effects can kind of vary. But if you're one of those organizations that is acting on behalf of the government, you run the risk of losing funding, right? But if you're in any of those groups, you definitely run the risk of reputation damages. You run the risk of a loss of trust within the general public, which nobody really wants that to happen. And everybody loves to share their bad experiences, especially within the disability community when it's not a very accessible experience. I know that personally, I have shared bad experiences with my younger brother who's visually impaired, with my parents, with my siblings, with my friends, and some of them don't shop at those places anymore. Some of them go out of their way to avoid them now because they're not serving and supporting me and the broader disability community. So outside of that, lawsuits is the biggest one, right? None of us want to deal with that, but what that boils down to is an individual who doesn't feel that they're being properly served and supported can file a claim or a lawsuit. And right now, those are ranging per instance anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000. Now, let's stop for a second. Per instance, yeah, it's not a one-time occurrence. It can happen multiple times. Most of the Fortune 500s have dealt with this once, if not multiple times already. We can look at the reports. The trend is moving towards targeting small to medium-sized businesses. So the big guys have gotten this pretty much figured out from a legal perspective, not in an in-practice perspective, but it can happen multiple times. So it's not really a matter of if it happens to me, it's when it happens to me. That is the mentality or the mindset that we should be thinking about this topic in regards to, is when it happens to me, am I going to be ready? And how am I going to respond? And so that is where this comes into play. How do we actually meet this Title II final rule? How do we make sure that we're ready when that day comes? And so 5, what seems like easy steps to not just protecting yourself, but actually taking accessibility seriously, implementing it to where you're actually providing an accessible experience. And so the first thing to do is to take inventory. Most of us are probably managing multiple websites. We have multiple apps. Maybe we have thousands of documents in our library that are public facing. We have all of these different channels and content out there. The first thing we need to do is take inventory, figure out what we actually have. Step 2 is to create a plan, create a roadmap based on priority of what needs to be accessible today and what maybe can wait a couple days. From there, we can move into the actual testing and remediation of our content, identifying areas within those WCAG guidelines that are not currently conforming, and come up with strategies and implement those strategies to actually address those. And then the last 2 steps here kind of happen throughout the process, one being documenting your process and the other being maintaining, keeping it up to date. And so if we look at that first one, the taking inventory component. Like I said, we all are managing tons of different content. So whether that's public facing or internal websites, it's your mobile applications, it's your kiosks and self-service stations, it's your digital documents, your PDFs, it's your social media content, your online learning platforms. All of those are covered. All of those need to be accessible. And that can be very overwhelming to try to figure out where to start. And so taking inventory, getting everything listed out, getting everything written down is, in most cases, the hardest part of this entire process. Sitting down and figuring that out, it takes time. You have to be thorough. If you miss something, it happens, but the more we can try to plan for now and reduce surprises, the better off we're going to be. And so once we get all of our stuff inventoried, then we can move into creating a roadmap. So we can't just jump straight into creating a plan. We can't go in blind, no pun intended, and try to just tackle this. So once we have our inventory, then we can really figure out where do we want to start. And generally, we want to start with our most priority items, our most priority websites and content that are getting the most traffic, that are being used the most. If it's not being used very often, we could push it a little bit down. Not that it's not important, but the more people, the more chances that somebody is going to need it to be accessible. So starting with your public facing first, tackling all of the high priority, looking at your websites and which pages get the most traffic, looking at your documents and which ones get downloaded the most. We can use data to help make these decisions, which might come as a surprise to some, but there is a lot of data that's not accessibility focused, but is marketing focused, that is technology focused, that we can incorporate into helping figure out what is priority today and what can wait until tomorrow. Once we have that roadmap, we have a timeline, we have resource allocation. The biggest thing that we hear is, I don't have the budget, I don't have the time, I don't have the skilled team members or the resources. But when we put a plan together, we can put those resources in place and we can ensure that all of our teams are moving in the right direction, but they're all on the same page. We're not trying to change things midstream. We're not trying to add things in or take things away when we have a plan. It brings a lot of structure to something that generally doesn't have a lot of structure to it. And so the biggest part of the process comes with the testing and the remediation. So testing, and that is what we focus on a lot, is the actual user experience. When we are testing a website, we could use overlays. I'm sure most of us are familiar with this icon and what that means. We could use automated scanning tools. We could use AI to help us with our testing, but really that's only going to give us about 30 to 50% of what we're after, which is compliance with those WCAG guidelines. What we should do is we should incorporate real users that use assistive technology. If there's really no better way to ensure something is accessible other than putting it in the hands of people who use assistive technology and asking them how it works. So myself, I use magnification, I use high contrast modes, I use screen readers, I use braille displays, I use assistive technology both in my work, but outside of my work. I'm using it to shop on Amazon and do my holiday shopping. I'm using it to pay my bills. I'm using it for all of those different activities. That is the best way to know what's broken, what needs fixed. Outside of complying with the guidelines, accessibility and usability are often viewed as separate things, but they do have a lot of overlap. Something can be completely accessible without being usable, and vice versa. We need to figure out a way to join those two together, and the best way to do that is by interacting with the community that it impacts. Outside of that, when we talk about our accessibility testing, one of the things that often gets overlooked when we talk to local governments, when we talk to organizations that are building these websites, they have third parties, they have vendors that are managing their content, they have plugins, they have widgets, they have all of these things outside of their control or their direct ownership. Those all need to be accessible as well. And a lot of organizations, when we tell them that, it adds to the overwhelming feelings. The good news is, when you sign that contract, when you procured that product or service or that widget or that technology, chances are you included language that said it needed to be accessible back then. And so we've gotten the fun opportunity to help basically tell people that you didn't get what you paid for. You signed a contract that said this was accessible. We tested it. It's not. And instead of that being your problem, it should be the problem of the person whose word you took that said it was accessible to begin with. The analogy that I always use is, if we went to the store and bought a brand new TV, took it home and hung it up on the wall and turned it on and only half the screen turned on, we would take it back. We wouldn't settle for that. We shouldn't be settling just because we've had that contract for 5 years. It's been too long. We shouldn't be settling and taking people's word for it when it's going to be our problem when somebody says it's not accessible. So your third parties, your vendors, your partners, all of those products and services that you're using, you can go back to those partners and say, hey, do you have a VPAT? Do you have an accessibility conformance report that validates how accessible this product or service actually is? If they don't, that's probably not a very good sign. If they do, don't just take that and say, okay, they have the documentation, verify it. Take the time to actually go through and make sure that that document wasn't put together in a scramble just because you asked for it. You want to make sure that they're actually eating their own cooking. They're doing what they're saying they're doing. So testing your own websites and apps is one part of it, but looking at all of that outside technology and holding them accountable is the other piece to that equation. Once you're done with your testing and your remediation, I'll back up quickly. Remediation, when it comes to actually fixing things, I kind of skipped that part of the process. It's very important to actually fix it, not just identify all the problems. When it comes to remediation, a lot of people fall into the mindset that we got to test everything today and we'll fix everything tomorrow. That's really a slow way of approaching it, taking a more agile approach to that process where you're testing and fixing in a sort of a reciprocating loop is going to speed things up pretty significantly. A lot of us have thousands of documents. If we tested 1,000 documents, by the time we got back to fixing those documents, they've probably updated and changed anyway, and those initial testing results are no longer valid. So don't try to test everything all at once and then fix it all at once. Take that agile approach where you're testing and fixing in that sort of reciprocating loop. Now we can move on to documenting your process. When it comes to documenting your process, this is that preparation for when somebody comes and asks, how accessible is this product or service? Or when somebody is trying to pay their bill and they can't, why is that an issue? Is it because of us? Is it because of the payment processor? There's a lot of variables there. And when we document our process and prepare for it ahead of time, it makes that significantly less stressful for us because we already know where the issues are and why they're occurring. And more than likely, we have a plan for when they're going to get fixed or when we're going to cut that contract and find a more accessible alternative. And so documenting while you're taking inventory, while you're prioritizing and creating your roadmap, documenting, especially when you're testing and remediating, putting timestamps to things, attaching teams and departments and individuals to who did what, not just documenting the issues, but documenting when they were resolved, or if we couldn't resolve them, why. Being able to answer all of those questions as you go through makes it a lot easier and, like I said, a lot less stressful rather than somebody comes knocking and now you're trying to trace back 3 years ago to when you started doing all of this and figure out where things went wrong. So building a system or acquiring a system, whatever it might be, don't just buy a system for the sake of having documentation. Make sure that you can actually understand it. Make sure that you can actually use it and that you're applying it within your department or your team. Because having documentation is one thing, but using it to learn and to grow and develop for future content as you're editing and changing and updating, you should be using that to learn so that you're not spending all of that time and all of those resources doing this all over again. And so that's where we get into the maintenance piece of it, maintaining it. Accessibility isn't a one-time deal. It's not something that we do today and we revisit in 2027 when the new final rule rolls out and now we got to conform to WCAG 2.2. Accessibility is an ongoing effort. It's that agile approach. It's continuous improvement. And the main thing here with the maintenance is we have never come across an organization that if you're not continuously working, as long as you're doing something, that's better than doing nothing. And that holds up in a lawsuit. That holds up in all of these conversations that as long as you're doing something, you're doing more than most everybody else. Accessibility has been a growing conversation. It's been picking up traction. It's been building. It's been growing. But there's not a ton of people that are doing this and doing it right. And so if you can come back to the table and say, hey, we know we're not perfect. We're not readily accessible. We're not fully ready for the deadline. But here's everything we've done over the last 8 months to make improvements. And we're doing it based on priority of what was the most used or the most trafficked or the most visited. That is going to go in an extremely long way, not just in that legal standpoint, but also within your community. Them knowing that you're trying matters. When it comes to the disability community, we see the effort. If we pull up a website and that little, where'd he go? If that guy's in the bottom right corner, that tells me everything I need to know. If I come to your website and I see that certain things aren't quite there, but I scroll to the bottom and I see an accessibility statement that says, we are striving for WCAG 2.1 AA conformance. We're actively testing and fixing. That tells a whole different story. So don't be afraid to communicate and to convey outward to the communities that you're serving and supporting what you're doing to serve and support them, whether it be how compatible it is with their assistive technology, wanting their feedback. That was the reason we ultimately connected, Laura, was you put out a survey asking, what do you want to see in our website when we update it? And so the more you can communicate, the more you can convey while you're maintaining, the better off everyone is going to be. But also, this may be the right time to look at your teams, your designers, your developers, your content creators, your managers, your leadership, and say, what areas can we improve on? What kind of training, what kind of upskilling can we go through to make sure that we're not just meeting these requirements, but we're continuing to enhance that experience? What can we do with our websites, with our mobile apps, with our social media content to provide a better experience, a seamless experience for everyone, including their assistive technology, including their personal preferences, including whatever they're using to interact with our content, whether it's a mobile phone, it's a desktop, it's a tablet. We want to make sure that everybody shares that experience. So maintenance is the last key to the puzzle. You got to get there first, but once you get there, keep going. Don't just stop and treat it like it's an annual project that we have to do because the government tells us we have to. Accessibility has a place within every team member across the organization, within everybody and their daily roles and responsibilities. We'll get back to that in a second, but what do you do if you get stuck? My best piece of advice is to tap into your local community, your local disability community, and start to collaborate and work with them. They're not as hard to reach out to and get a hold of and engage with as you might think. Where RJ and I are from, Canton, Ohio, we have learned over the last year that there's over 100 providers just in Stark County that are serving and supporting the disability community, from the Stark Board of Developmental Disabilities all the way through very niche providers that are teaching blind people how to read and write in Braille or putting wheelchair ramps in homes. Those are very good doorways into the community. And if you care enough to reach out, you'll be pleasantly surprised by how eager the response is from that community to get involved, to help drive that change, to make things more accessible, not just for themselves, but for everybody else in their community. If you find yourself stuck and nervous about reaching out, you can definitely partner with an accessibility partner or group of experts. There are a lot of good players in the accessibility field, but there's just as many bad players. Be careful with who you're working with. Do your due diligence when you're choosing an accessibility partner. Make sure that they're doing it the right way. They're incorporating people with disabilities. They're paying them fair wages. They're not just hiring people without disabilities and teaching them how to use a screen reader and charging the industry rates at $300 a page. Make sure you're checking, crossing your T's, dotting your I's, working with those good players, because those are the players that are actually driving the change, helping organizations to meet these requirements and go above and beyond them. And then my last slide, I put this at the end of every presentation that I do now, is commitment as a team. Everybody has a role to play. I just said that like 2 minutes ago. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's true. Whether you're working in HR, providing accommodations to your teams, you're part of the messaging and branding team, putting video clips from a recent webinar on social media, you're designing the next website, you're developing and actually building the website. Everybody has a role to play. Accessibility fits into our roles. We just don't know it yet. And so that's that training and upskilling, that this whole process of meeting these requirements shouldn't just be viewed as we need to make our website accessible. We have a mobile app that needs to be accessible. Try to figure out a way to get your team involved, leadership all the way down, and excited about accessibility because of what it brings to the community, not just the disability community, but everyone. We all benefit when things are accessible. We all benefit when things are usable. Getting everybody involved and getting everybody excited is the only way that this actually happens and the only way that it actually works. If you try to pin it all on your designers and your developers and say, it's your problem, it only talks about our websites and our mobile apps and our kiosk that you design and you build, it's not going to go anywhere. They're not going to be supported. They're not going to get the resources that they need, which really aren't much when it comes to making things accessible. It's more about being intentional. But if you try to pin it just on those teams, they're going to get burned out. They're not going to be able to deliver. They need that support from all of their different colleagues, friends, departments, and even leadership. And so I know this is a pretty big topic, so I didn't want to talk the entire time. I wanted to leave an ample amount of time for questions and conversation around this topic, making sure that if you have questions, somebody came up right before this and said, we have thousands of documents. What do we do with them? Do we need to remediate all of those documents, or can we archive some of them? Yes, you can archive them, but you need to figure out which ones are still relevant, which ones you can go back to the dates and the cutoffs. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but there are ways to prioritize this in an effective way, including your 10,000 documents in your library. If we don't get to all of the questions, my LinkedIn is up here. Just scan the QR code. I've never said no to a conversation, and RJ and I will both be hanging out afterwards, and hopefully we can answer your question, but at the very least, if we don't know the answer right now, we will get your contact information and we will follow up to get you the answers so that you can, if I can go all the way back, so that you can be the blue smiley face, not somewhere in the middle there. So it's a lot, but it's really not super difficult once you actually start to approach it from more of a process rather than a project.
So to start, we're going to read questions from our virtual attendees. So our first question is, does Title II apply to only social media, websites, etc., or does it also include emails, forms, and Word documents or PDFs that any agency employee may send or share with the public?
So good question. Social media content, absolutely. But it does address both internal and external. So your communications, more than likely, you should be trying to make those as accessible just for your colleagues. I forget the exact statistic, but most people aren't requesting accommodations in the workplace, even though they could benefit from them. So you sending an accessible email, you creating an accessible Google form for the holiday party, whatever that might be, I would encourage you to make it accessible. It might not be explicitly identified under Title II, but benefiting your teammates, benefiting the public, any chance you can get to do so, I would try to take advantage and do so.
Do we have any questions in the room?
A couple years ago, we had a accessibility with the accessibility toolbar. We evaluated it, but we ended up going with Recite Me because it seemed to be more robust, had more of the functionality that we're looking for. We thought that was our answer. We put the alt text and tried to do everything else. Do we need that toolbar anymore if we do everything else? And then the second question I have is, we're looking to roll out an internal app that kind of like a text message with an agency. Not everyone has access to email. Does that need to comply as well?
So the overlay question, I don't think we can ever escape that question, RJ. Um, it's a I tried to touch on it briefly, but since there's a question, we'll get into it. Overlays have a place. They have a place in the market, absolutely, but they're not in the way that they're traditionally marketed and advertised to us as the buyers. A lot of them are marketed as, this makes your website fully accessible. You don't have to worry about anything. Class action lawsuits tell us otherwise. From just earlier this year. So I personally have a very mixed feeling when it comes to these overlays and these widgets, not to name any names. There's lots of them out there. I see the potential in them. My take on them is we're not quite there yet. They will get better. They will improve. AI has done a lot for everything in the last year or 2 years. I think those tools can continue to improve and find a place. But ultimately, when we talk about those recite me's and the different overlays and accessibility toolbars, putting the making your website accessible to the side. But the menus that allow you to change the contrast and the text spacing and pause animations and to do all of those things to customize your experience, that I am a big proponent for. I always, when we do training like the one I was delivering right before this morning from a hotel room, we always talk about giving the user as much control over their experience as possible. The more control they have, the more likely they can make it exactly how they want, to where it's going to be a memorable experience. And so those panels of tools that turn on a screen reader to read the page out loud to you, to make it less distraction free. I forget all the terms that they use. I do see a place for those and allowing the user to customize, but the audience that attracts that, the need for that the most, is the older demographic. I don't know how many of us have tried to teach parents or grandparents how to use smartphones, but they're not very open to learning how to use the new technology, let alone learning how to use a screen reader or how to magnify or turn high contrast mode on. They just want it to work. And so going to a website and seeing that little icon in the corner, clicking on it and being able to increase the text size because grandpa has a hard time reading the small phone screen, that's super helpful with your audiences that don't want to learn the assistive technology. Now, your users like myself or like RJ or anybody that's a part of our team that we work with, we are bringing our own tools into the party. We're bringing those with us. So they don't really do much for a user that's more tech savvy, but for those low tech people, I think they definitely have a place. And I'm sorry, I forget the second question already.
I wanted to add that a lot of the reason that we don't like working with websites, and the first thing that we do when we test them to check for accessibility is to turn those widgets off. So this is kind of the answer to your question. If you're taking the necessary steps that James talked about and documenting, auditing, and remediating, there really truly is no reason for you to be paying whatever it is a month or per year to have those widgets on there. In what he talked about of having an accessibility statement, documenting all those at the bottom, it's just as good as showing, the people coming to your website that yes, accessibility is at the front of mind, just like that the little stick man does when you see it pop up on a website. But a lot of the times, the functionality that those widgets are adding to the website messes with how the web page or the content is natively being developed. So we just looked at a website, and this is just as an example, that it, when installed, immediately acted as a type of screen reader. Somebody who already uses a screen reader that goes to that page then has two people screaming at them in their ear, and they're not usually always in sync with one another. So, and it's a pain in the butt trying to navigate through that and get one of them turned off or the one that you used. The individuals who have disabilities that are coming to your website, and we speak a lot about this in schools when we talk to people, well, what should I provide to them? A lot of the time when it comes to assistive technologies, the users that are coming in there, they have their preordained tools that they like to use. If you make the content accessible for those types of tools, you don't have to provide something extra like a widget or something like that. They can manipulate the page how they want to, use it with the screen reader that they've been using for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, for the entirety of their life. And so, yes, to answer your question, with these steps, widgets are not really a necessity. We make your site accessible is 100% of the 30% that it actually is capable of looking at. And the rest, like James says, there is no AI option for someone to be able to go through your website, manually test it. And those manual issues that users are going to run into are the ones that are going to result in a lawsuit or someone reaching out and saying, I can't do what I intend to do on your platform through your content, through your class, whatever it may be. And then I think your second question was regarding an internal texting like notification system.
That was it.
Go ahead.
Well, first, fantastic point on the users coming with their technology. How many of us have an iPhone, an Android, a laptop, a computer? Pretty much everybody at this point. And the really, really cool thing about the accessibility space is every one of those devices comes with a screen reader. Every one comes with the ability to invert and high contrast. So accessibility is at a point where it's being built into the device. It's being built into the browser, where you don't have to go buy $1,000 screen reader license. You don't have to go acquire and download external softwares or hardwares for most of the experience. I would encourage everyone in here to, whatever device you prefer, go into your settings, find the accessibility settings, and just take a look at what all is built into your device without adding anything. The second part of the second question with the internal communication app, internal technologies are definitely covered. I would highly encourage to make sure that as you're building and creating that accessibility is being implemented. Now, because it involves communication, the WCAG isn't going to fully apply to that. You're going to have to step outside of that box a little bit and look at more of the criteria that are related to like the Section 508 standards when it comes to functional performance, when it comes to software, hardware, and some of those external factors that just aren't covered in the WCAG yet.
Excellent questions, by the way. I think I saw a couple hands maybe over there. Yeah, go ahead.
We need the mic.
Thank you. My question is, when you talk about social media posts being part of the Title II qualifiers, so alt text hasn't really been an added tool for sites like Facebook or X for a long time. I think it's only been about, what, 2 or 3 years for that. Is that something where we need to go back that length in time and add alt text to, or is it just something that moving forward, beginning on that April 26th date, that we need to be conscious of having alt text and any other necessary descriptors on our social media content?
Again, I would go back and look at the relevancy of said content. I doubt the first thing you posted on your Facebook page gets very much traction. So that might not be very applicable at this point. But what I would say is, starting from whenever you became aware of the requirements, so maybe that's today, maybe that's 6 months ago, it's a year ago, I would make a very conscious effort that moving forward, everything we're going to do picture-wise going on social media is going to have alt text, and just make that a standard. But document it and say, as of, what is today, November 19th, 2025, everything that we post image-wise on social media has alt text. That's part of that document along the way. And the best thing that we can do is that continuous improvement. I don't think it would make a whole lot of sense personally to go back through your social medias. I don't know, depending on the platform, you might not even be able to go back and edit those posts anymore. So I don't think going back will do much unless it's like the immediate recency, like last couple of weeks or whatever, still getting traction. But I would definitely focus more on starting today, moving forward, implementing accessibility best practices, not just with images and alt text, but providing alternatives, making sure that within like video-based platforms that you're not just relying on the AI generated captions, because most of those don't do a very good job with our names and the names of our organizations and acronyms yet. I've looked at Fortune 500 companies that used the AI captions and it spelled the name of their company wrong. So definitely take a close look and make sure you're utilizing features like closed caption. You could add in audio descriptions, but ultimately, the more alternatives you provide, going back to the user being in control, some users prefer the pictures that you share, others prefer video, others prefer audio, others prefer plain text. And so I would try to incorporate a variety of those different medias and alternatives within all of your content to make sure that you're reaching as many people as possible in the way that they prefer to be reached.
So to kind of add on to one James's presentation, but this specifically about, okay, what is the logical place in which I start? A lot in what we deal with and kind of safeguarding yourselves, your businesses, and just covering your butts, to speak frankly, is conscious directional effort in accessibility. So that is to say that I have a 500-page website, or I have 1,000 posts on Instagram. It is the conscious effort of that when you start that auditing process. Hey, let's start with a block of the 10 most trafficked web pages on our website. A lot of that. So we're talking 1/10 the pages that you, or 1/5, or whatever it is, of the pages that you have on your website will actually be audited and remediated and brought up to standards. It was done with the directive of, 95% of the time, the people that visit our website are going to be on these first 10 pages. And if someone does approach that, or if a lawsuit is put into place, most, judges and people looking at that will look at it and be like, they're making that conscious directive effort to go through the most used stuff. And that is setting good precedent for yourself that, yes, when the time comes, everything that is currently going out is being made accessible, and we have shown that we will backtrack and get to what we can to make it accessible as well. This is the whole reason James talked about the agile approach. So you get hit with a lawsuit, God forbid, knock on wood, whatever prayers you want to do, that never happens. If you are just testing and nothing is being rolled out to actually make what's tested, you could sit there in front of someone and be like, we've had our team, we swear, for the last 10 months that do nothing but all day but audit, and we have all this, but nothing is fixed. Do those rollouts. Keep it a cyclical effort where content and web pages are being remediated and your new stuff is coming out accessible, so you have that living proof that this is what we are capable of, and this is what we're going to take back to the rest of the content that we know and we are transparent that is not accessible.
Knowing where to start is the hardest part. I wasn't kidding. I wasn't lying. Like, figuring out what is step one is the hardest part of the entire process. And making that step and continuing to take another step and another step and another step, that is what we're looking for. There's been a long time of nothing happening. Be a part of the action, not just saying, well, everybody else is doing nothing, so I'm going to do nothing too. be the one to set the example.
We've got some more questions from our people attending virtually. The first is, how can like agencies know what deadline applies to them?
I would go back to the size of the population within your county, your city, your state. If it's above the 50,000, you have until April. If it's below that, you have until April of 2027. I'm sure there's databases out there for everything that will tell you how many people are in your population that can then help figure that out. If
And-
not, you could always ask ChatGPT. Everybody loves AI, right?
And then someone else was wondering, are there free or low cost tools to check accessibility that you like for testing? So when someone wants, like, what
Yep.
would you recommend?
So going back to the testing, manual testing is going to be your most thorough. It's going to be your most complete. Automated testing, there's a ton of them out there. There's Wave, there's Andy, there's Axe DevTools, there's Lighthouse, there's Site Improve, Monsita. Like there is a list on the W3C's website of, I think, close to 100 different accessibility testing tools. Most of them are as good as they're programmed to be. So 30 to 50% of the 80-ish success criteria that you have to conform to, it's only doing about half of that on a good day. I would definitely use them, but use them with caution. I'm not telling you not to use them, but ultimately accessibility is for people. Using tools to try to tell you how it's going to work for a person 9 times out of 10 doesn't work out the way that we would hope it does.
So you got to go real slow for me. So manual testing would just be accessing people that we serve to test to make sure that it is compliant. Am I understanding that?
Yes. So manual testing would be someone like me going on your website and looking at everything from top to bottom on, say, your homepage. And say you added a picture to your website and didn't put alt text on it. Because of the certifications that we have in the training that we have to do that kind of auditing, that image we would document and say, this doesn't have alt text on it. Sure, an automated tool might be able to do that, but I'm going through it in the way that another user would use that. It's not a line of JavaScript. It's not a machine telling you how good of a user experience it is. It's an actual person telling you this works or this doesn't work. And then if you're working with someone like myself or RJ, we are trained to do that testing to actually match it up against those requirements.
Okay.
So it's a user who, say it's somebody with limited mobility who can only use a keyboard, or it's somebody who is totally blind who uses a screen reader or a braille display. It's someone like me who uses magnification. We're pulling your website up with all of those different tools to understand what is actually happening, not just what the computer is programmed to tell us.
So follow-up question. I am using alternatives to just the alt tags. I am tagging my photos, but
Yep.
how intense do they, like, I just put the name of the person often. Is that compliant? Is that enough?
Well, that's why we get people involved, because in some cases that's plenty. In other cases, maybe not so much. And so these tools that I mentioned, like 10 of them, those tools, and that's why I say they're as good as they're programmed to be, right? And so those tools can tell you if alt text is present or not. It cannot tell you if it's good. And so having a person go through with a screen reader who's totally blind, who can't also see what that picture is, and asking them, does that make sense? You get a very quick response of, yeah, that makes sense in relation to the heading and the paragraph of text that was right before it. Or no, that doesn't make sense. I don't know who that person is. That is where the manual side comes in, because it fills all of those quality gaps where, yes, we could be checking a box technically, but that's where the usability and the accessibility really blend and create that experience where, instead of feeling the need to write an entire novel and take the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words literally, maybe a sentence works. And there are best practices on how long those alternative texts should be, but without getting into all of the technicalities, it's more about providing the context to fill in that experience.
There are some things that automated tools, and I think this is where you're asking, like, the difference between what can a tool do and what can a manual tester do and all that, just can't be done. Like, we'll use the tools and the individuals that we train, and when we test websites, they're good to have to point you in the general direction. But for like specific examples, like, it can say that there is an issue in headings on a web page, or with the way that the website flows. But unless I sit there and I use only a keyboard and use the tab key to tab through the entirety of the website to ensure that it's not jumping from the URL to the bottom of the page to the back to the top of the page to disappearing where you can't see you're at, there's just not another option for that. It's not to say, like, I am colorblind, and I do most of the visual testing, but it's not something that affects me on a daily basis. But to test some of those visual things, or even with some of the screen reader stuff, I don't have to have a disability or be in the same shoes that James is to be able to test that. It just takes, it's the time, it's the effort, and not so much somebody with a disability to do it. We could train, but also James and I are here, and what we do is to give individuals with disabilities those opportunities to upskill themselves and find meaningful work. And a lot of the people that we have trained appreciate to be in positions where their entire lived experience is now a benefit to their job. And that's why we highly strive for, manual testing. Cool. So I hope that answers your question. Cool.
I want to make two quick points here. One, I know we've mentioned alt text on images a lot. That is one criteria out of the list of 80. So that is the tip of the iceberg, quite literally. And RJ mentioning that we train professionals with disabilities. We only hire people who use that technology who are a part of the disability community, primarily because the statistics around unemployment and disability are quite staggering. 70% of blind people are unemployed. So those numbers are not fair in any way, shape, or form. And I, as a part of that community, do not fall in that 70%. And I feel not obligated, but I want to change that. So we're not just making things accessible, we're also addressing a whole line of other issues and conversations in doing so.
I think we're at time, but great questions, everybody. Like James said, we'll be up here. I may be losing my voice, but I'll spare what I have left of it to try to answer some of your guys' questions. So thank you guys for your time. We greatly appreciate you guys having us here.
Thank you.